The vast majority of software engineers don't know how to stand up. And that's not to say they need to join the Paralympics. I mean the meetings that you get if you're in an agile team. As the industry becomes more and more competitive, you need something that will make you stand out. One of the needlessly overlooked skills that we're just completely setting aside because everybody's chasing the 1,000th LeetCode code question is soft skills. And that manages a large amount of people's perceptions. So in this video, I'm going to give you 3 very actionable protocols to make you stand out in the very short period of time you have to give your update in a stand-up. Also, these are applicable in other areas of software engineering. It's just that I feel like they most apply to stand-ups. And in the description, I'll link a document that will have these and also the other 9 rules that I think would take you from the average, which is awful, if not just completely useless, to actually pretty competent at holding yourself and coming across more confident. So the game here isn't to make the stand-up some 30-minute stand-up comedy sketch. The point is to get across what you're saying in a concise way, but also to hold interest and make people actually want to pay attention to what you're saying. And honestly, the way you make people interested in anything you have to say is the same pretty much in every scenario. It's you have to be excited about what you're talking about. So you probably have somebody on your team who says, I looked into upgrading the unit tests today and, I spent some time looking in certain classes. It got a bit confusing and yeah, I think it's better than it was. It's up for pull request. If someone could check that for me, cheers. People are within the first 5 seconds of you talking, just immediately flicking to their second screen, looking at something completely different, not really listening to what you're saying. The only person probably listening is your manager because they're paid to actually listen. But on the other hand, if you would say, hey guys, you know how we absolutely hate mocking every single piece of information for our classes, even the bits we're not testing? Well, I think I found a solution to that. And then you pause, and then you go on to immediately pay it off and give something valuable, like, oh, I've introduced AutoMock to some of these unit tests. I reckon we could roll them out across some new situations. What do people think about this? People are going to listen, because they're going to be like, oh, shit, that guy might have just saved me a couple of hours every time I go to do that task. Or you might immediately get shut down, but at least you've brought something to the table. You've sparked some kind of conversation. But the main point is you're excited about what you're talking about. If you've gone out of your way to not just state the obvious, you've learned something new. You're hooking people's attention, and you're actually giving them some value. So the next time that you go to speak, they're like, oh, that Matt guy, he might actually have something worth saying. I'm going to listen. But it's not enough just to pose the question and pay it off. You have to genuinely sound like you're interested, which if you're not, find something about what you're doing that does interest you and bring it up in the stand-up. This doesn't mean that you then go in to explain the intricacies of how AutoMock works and give some examples or anything like that. You're just throwing out some bait so people are listening and you're showing a keen interest about it. And chances are you might get a message after that meeting where somebody will say, hey, that sounded really interesting. Tell me a bit more about it. And already you're immediately going from just a general background character to somebody who suddenly has something that they're bringing to the table. Something's changed. People are going to notice that. Now, I think as a software engineer, you probably have a natural interest in learning new tools within your work, but that's within your comfort zone, and this little system is going to be easy for you. So if you want to really push it to the next level, try and make your hook a joke and have the payoff informational but also funny. It doesn't matter if your joke's terrible and no one laughs, because, to be honest, the bar will be set so low in those meetings that the chances are even a bad joke is probably going to get a laugh and people are going to appreciate it just for breaking how mundane stand-ups normally are. If you do this daily and you keep it short, and I'm really emphasizing that you don't go on some, I don't want a Norm Macdonald 5-6 minute joke. As good as they are, the stand-up is not the right place for that. So to summarize, be excited about what you're talking about. Make it interesting for other people, but it's easier to make it interesting for other people if you're interested in it yourself. Right, the second thing is a little bit more social theory related. So there's probably somebody in your meetings who, at every opportunity, will try and veer the meeting towards what they've done, what they're doing, and what they're going to do. And just as you're about to take your turn, they've got something else to talk about, so they start speaking over you and carry on for an extra 5 minutes, and you're just out there thinking, Christ, when is this guy going to end? When is this guy going to stop talking? Well, the chances are you're not too dissimilar. The chances are while other people are talking, you're thinking about what you're going to say next. This is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about how to interact with other people. It's that most people, like you, are thinking about what they're going to say, not what other people are saying. So if you're overly focused on what you say, it's going to have the smallest payoff, because in reality, people care more about what they're doing than what you're doing. So given that people are more interested in themselves, how can you take advantage of that? Pick a colleague that has helped you in the last 24 hours and mention it. Now, you might be sat there thinking, oh, I get a task that's 3 days long, and I just go into the coding zone with my Sigma Male grind set music on, and I just don't focus on anything else. Well, cool. You're missing out on a massive part of being a team. The chances are you probably could have got what you were doing done faster if you'd actually interacted with some people, because I can guarantee you don't have all of the knowledge. Other people on your team will know things that you don't. So if you haven't interacted with anyone in 24 hours, that's step one. Actually reach out. See if somebody knows something you don't. If you're working on something that's in the front end and you know someone in your team is really interested in UX, message them. Say, hey, I know you've got an eye for this kind of thing. Can we quickly hop on a 5-minute call, if that, maybe less, and just run through some information with them? And then when it comes to the stand-up, mention it. Bring it up. Everyone's going to be like, oh, that person's not talking about themselves. That's not normal. Because it's not. If you really pay attention, most people are just talking about themselves all the time. Be complimentary and be genuine about it. You can't just fake and say, this guy's the greatest, when in reality, you called them and they had nothing to say. Although you could spin that. You could say, okay, we both looked together, and to be fair, we couldn't come up with a solution. I think this issue is harder than I thought it was. What this is also going to do is it's going to build respect with your team. People are going to think, that's the guy that's actually paying attention. He remembers that I helped it. He values it so much that he's bothered to actually bring it up in the stand-up. And then in the future, when you genuinely need help with something, they're more likely to come help you. They're also more likely to pay attention to what you're saying in the stand-up. And if they have anything to weigh in on what you've said and what you've mentioned that you've worked on, suddenly you're going to start have hints just flowing in. And it will just make your workflow so much faster. And even if they're bad ideas, they're still ideas and things that you may not have considered before. And that's part of what being on a team is. Just working in this isolated bubble, there's this weird culture of being the lone wolf. It's not optimal. Right, so the last one is the most important. We evolved to pay attention to the people around us because they were one of the larger dangers, right? If somebody had a negative thing to say about something, you needed to hear it, because if it was, there's a wolf in the forest versus this bread tastes good, one of those is going to prevent you from dying, right? We have a negative cognitive bias. So you're more likely to remember negative events than positive events. You can probably remember more things that are bad that have happened to you than are good, right? It's not like you're constantly kept up at night by all the good things that happened to you in your life. No, you're kept up at night because of all the bad things. And that's your brain trying to remember them so that you don't repeat the same problem again. And this goes all the way down to the micro. One of the more memorable things that you'll have on your team is that you could probably name, without hesitation, the person who complains the most. And it's for that exact reason. Your brain is listening for negativity because it's, once upon a time, it was life or death. It's just one of those legacy systems that were never updated. There is almost no situation in a stand-up where you should be complaining. It needs to either be constructive or positive. So, okay, this is going really well, or, okay, I've had this problem, here's how I'm going to solve it, or I've had this problem, does anybody have any suggestions on how to solve it? Not, I can't deal with this, it's really hard, I just want a different task. Because it's very easy to do that, because we want to vent, we want to let out our problems, but fundamentally, you're a professional, and this isn't the place to do that. You've got to think of it like this. People are going to remember one complaint over your 10 successes. If you come in, stand up after stand up, I've absolutely crushed this task, I've come in way under our time estimation, and in fact, I've refactored some of the areas so that it's more maintainable and readable. People have commented on the PR that this has been a major improvement. So you come in 10 days in a row, just information like that, people are absolutely patting you on the back, you're getting sent great gifts in the Discord while you're talking about it. Everybody has a win streak. And then you get to day 11, and you get the curveball. You get that task that looked like it was just going to take 2 hours, but it takes 8 or 10, and you still feel like you have no idea where the end is. Don't complain about it. That isn't an opportunity to suddenly mope and throw a pity party, because people do that, and there's a reason that you can remember or identify someone on your team that's like that. It's because it's memorable. And when it comes to your pay review and your manager sat there opposite you and you say, I've been hyper successful, what comes to his mind is the negatives before the successes. And it is possible to have no negatives. You can, in almost every situation, you can flip it on its head. I've referred to this before, but there's Jocko Willink has a clip, I'll link it below, where he gives out a bunch of situations where you would want to complain and you'd want to say, this is shit. But instead, he's a proponent of this technique of saying, good. Okay, so the task didn't go as I expected and it's taking longer. Good. I learned more. I've tried 10 things that didn't work, but now I know they're not the problem and I'm going to find a solution maybe in the next 5. It's a growth mindset. It's looking at things as an opportunity, not as a blocker. And if there is a blocker, you just state it to the team. And then together you come to a solution, not, this can't be done. It's too hard. I need someone else to take it off my plate. Because that's the wrong attitude. So to summarize that, don't complain. There is no point in a stand-up where you should be complaining, or just in general in your career. Always try and bring it across in a constructive way. Here's an opportunity, never here's the problem. I think we can work on this, not this isn't working for me. So you've got 3 rules for stand-ups here. If you click my link in the description, I'll email you over a cheat sheet that has these 3 and the other 9 for the other situations you'd probably find yourself in as a software engineer, be it code reviews, pair programming, or client presentations. And if you implement these, you're going to be starting to move on the path towards being one of the more socially competent people on your team. Now, one of the levers that you can pull to really push this ahead is getting your hormones in balance, and the way that you'd go about that is having better personal fitness. It's another massively overlooked area. If you take the stereotype of software engineers, we're typically not in good shape and we're typically not very socially competent. So if you click on this video here, I'll show you my framework to take a software engineer who has no background in fitness to having a good idea of how to start pushing forwards and getting ahead of everybody around you. Otherwise, I hope this video helped. Cheers.